So what's happening is discoverability is actually not a very big problem. So what is a bigger problem is for you to say, am I creating good content? Am I focusing on my core competence? Am I
Yeah.
ministering to people the way God has called me to minister? So I think that if you just get deep down into that and then use AI for enhancing that, then I think there is a good chance that we can use AI well as a media ministry.
Welcome to the Digital Ministry Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Runyon, and the Digital Ministry Podcast, of course, is brought to you by MII Global. We've been doing this a while now. This is episode 24, and today we have longtime MII friend, contributor, expert on all things digital ministry, Natchi Lazarus, with us today. Natchi, it's good to be with you again.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Nick. Everyone.
I was happy to hear you got to hang out with some of my friends and former colleagues recently. You were speaking at a Keynote event in Delhi. Is that where
That's
it was?
right, in Delhi.
Yeah. So, what was the conversation there? Was it about? Well, you were presenting on AI, I imagine.
Yeah, it was a conference on future trends. So my opening keynote was about emerging trends and how to navigate them. So I spoke a bit about AI, a bit about spatial computing and ministry, a bit about Web3. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So I know, like, you're an expert in this space. We talk about it, from time to time. Let's play a little prediction game here. What do you think we're going to see roll out from the AI community between now and the end of the year?
Basically, I'm just seeing two things with all the companies, which was majorly disrupted by Mark Zuckerberg because of open sourcing, the 405 billion model. Nobody expected that. But outside that, there are just two things that everybody seems to be focusing on, whether it is OpenAI or Copilot guys in Microsoft or any of them. They just seems to be focusing on two things. One is the whole idea of custom GPTs, moving from custom GPTs to AI agents, which by the way was one of the things I wanted us to talk about, because that's like very connected to AI tools, and I think that is going to be the next big thing for ministries, AI agents, because anything that's customized, that works on its own, that doesn't need human interference as much as possible, that's what we need in ministries. So I think that's the one thing I see in terms of a future that's coming. The second is the recent announcements about publishing from Perplexity. Perplexity kind of opened up a couple of days ago this whole concept of Perplexity publishing, which is bringing advertisements and revenues into AI search. So that's like, to me, that's the next big thing. It's almost like Google's AdWords days. If you remember our good old late 90s when the whole AdWords thing kind of went through the roof, and as ministries, we were trying to think what that means. I think that is happening to the AI world with the publishing project that Perplexity has announced. And suddenly I see companies starting to think about revenue models, and those kind of regular business terms are coming in rather than playful, experimental, nascent kind of languages. So those are the two things I'm seeing in AI.
I think those are some great things to talk about. I kind of want to dig into the AI ads and the Perplexity issue a bit. And just to give a little bit of background, I think you probably know some of this, but for our listeners, just to explain that AdWords explosion, maybe especially for younger listeners who might not have experienced that. I talked myself into my first marketing job when I was 23 or something. And so this was 2003, 2004 in there. And I was working for an e-commerce business, 100% online. And I started as a marketing associate, and I got as like the low man on the totem pole, so to speak. By the way, does that example translate in India? Do people know what that means?
Not many, but That's okay. We can understand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was like, I was the low guy, the individual contributor at the bottom of the stack on the team. So they were like, here, you run all of the ads and like just figure it out, kind of like an analyst position. Well, we built this business model where I knew that if, based on looking at our business, if I could acquire a customer, like a first time, like paid conversion, for $121 or less, we would make money. And I knew that because of our average order size, annual customer retention, order frequency. Like we just put this whole model together. So I knew that I could put, dollars into Google, and we were big players in Google, like DoubleClick, and all of these things that ended up getting rolled up into Yahoo and Google and the pay-per-click models. And it was just a machine. It was great. That landscape shifted. So I eventually became the director of marketing. That company grew rapidly. We were on the Inc. 500 list, which is, Inc. magazine publishes this list of, I think now it's 5,000 fastest growing companies in the U.S. At the time, it was 500. We were on that list 3 years in a row just because this model worked so well. But then the model shifted. And anybody listening to this who's tried to run AdWords recently knows that it doesn't work that way anymore. You've got algorithms that are making placement decisions for you based on all kinds of signals. This is true with Facebook. We saw the same thing with Facebook too. Facebook ads used to be incredibly effective because of the targeting. Now you can't target like you used to. So like these things change all the time. So being early is a real advantage for ministry teams, because if you can figure out AI plus ads early, there's an opportunity there because, and tell me if you agree with this or not, I think it's the most open and the most effective at the very beginning. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even Perplexity, that is kind of trying to lead this space in this new model of advertising, it's still figuring it out. They've openly said in the announcement that this is just a beta kind of a thing. Perplexity, for those of our audience who haven't used it, it's a search engine with AI. So it's like Google powered AI powered search engine. So when you search for something, instead of getting links, you're getting these detailed answers. And what Perplexity users do is they ask another question. So that follow-up question is like the big user experience difference compared to Google. Because in Google, you don't ask follow-up question. You just click and go to the site. But here you ask more question. And based on the past results, it's contextualizing your answers. So what Perplexity is doing is very interesting. So they're saying, look, we will pay you for every relevant follow-up. If a brand is mentioned, then we will share a little bit of revenue with you. What's interesting. So what's going to happen is, as ministries, if we get into this space early and we understand this, who is better positioned than us in terms of follow-up? Because let's just say you're running a campaign about marriage and family, like how to be a good father. There are like a million follow-up questions that you can ask. You can immediately say, how can I help my child? How can I mentor my child? What do I say with this situation? So you're like follow-up questions. And every time in the follow-up questions, somehow with this whole revenue model, it's still close to beta. Once they open it up, as a ministry, if you're able to participate in this model, if the answers are going to be relevant from your ministry's search content that comes up, then it becomes an opportunity for you to showcase the ministry's content. So it's an evolving, interesting model. Like you said, Nick, getting in early, understanding early, and kind of using them, that's a great way to go. I think everybody should do that.
You mentioned, I want to go back to, you mentioned people that you follow on LinkedIn. Like, who are some good voices that you're listening to and watching that, we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I more than just mentioning names, I would say as ministry leaders, we should definitely follow the companies and the data scientists behind them. So every company has data scientists. So on LinkedIn, instead of if you follow the marketing guy, you only get to get the sales pitch. But if you follow the data scientist, you probably get the insights.
Come on.
I know. Sorry, marketers. I know. Yeah. So I would say just go behind most of the data scientists, thought leaders in OpenAI, in Perplexity, in Microsoft, and on Google platforms and Meta as well. So that's what I do. I also follow some Harvard professors and Stanford professors who are leading the space. I was recently also at a missional AI event. I heard this amazing professor, Thomas, came up to the stage and he said, I've been doing AI for 40 years. I'm like, okay, there you go. So those kind of people who have been there, done that.
The definition of AI has shifted quite a bit in the last 40 years. So be interesting to hear that talk and what Thomas has to say about that. I think there is a spectrum, leading voices in that space. What I've seen is there's this spectrum of adoption with open arms all the way down, or to, maybe it's not up and down, but all the way to like, let's be very cautious. Elon Musk has famously been quoted as saying, this is far more dangerous than anybody realizes or knows. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so now that you've asked this question, I've really thought deeply about Gen AI. And I believe one of the reasons this thing is unique, Nick, is because of the word generative. I believe from a theological perspective, okay, not going to preach, but just going to touch from a theological perspective.
You can preach. It's all right. It's a digital ministry podcast, so preaching is allowed.
Generation, creation, creating something is in our DNA. That's part of who we are, because we are made in the image and likeness of God. And the entire Bible. So this is some of the material that's coming up in my next book, by the way. So a preview to my next book. So when the Bible kind of opens the screen, God in the process of creation, and you see this whole prompt engineering played out throughout the Bible. There is an input, there is a generation, and then there's an output. There's an input, there's a generation, and output. And this is a pattern that we see in the Word of God. And speaking and using words to create something, that is the essence of Christian faith. And that's the essence of this creation. And that's the image and likeness that we are made in. Using words or languages to produce something, to create something, is part of who we really are. So that's why I think as human beings, whether we are Christians or not, and everybody's excited about this technology because it just fits into who we are. So the whole Speak Positively, even the Secret movement, everything talks about speaking positively, saying things and creating things with your words, creating things with your mouth. Right. And that's just the essence of this creation. So that's why I think generative AI is essentially a very different technology compared to everything else. And that is what gives rise to the fact that if it is so powerful and it is so inbuilt into the way the world is created, the way the world functions, then it also has the ability to go wrong, because the world has gone wrong before and it will go wrong again. So that's why I can't say, no, everything is nice and rosy. But it also gives me hope that if something can go wrong, we can use the same principles to make it go right. And that is precisely why this conversation is important, that you are having with me, with everybody else in the space. It's important for us to understand AI. It's important for us to understand these emerging technologies, put our heads deep into this and say, how can I master this so that I can influence? So all of us influencing social media is a different thing. It's important. That's what I've been talking about for the last two decades, you and me. But influencing the AI space is a whole different ballgame, because when you don't influence social media, there are a different set of problems. But if you don't influence AI, the set of problems are going to be much, much more complex. So as Christians, I think we are in a good space, especially as ministry leaders. We are in a good space to influence this emerging technology. And for once, we are not playing catch up. We are growing along with the technology. So it makes it easy. So to answer your question, yeah, I do agree with some of the Elon Musk kind of predictions, but I'm also bullish in the sense I don't think there's anything to fear. It's just that we have to be absolutely cautious. We have to be on our foot, and we have to be quick. We have to be very, very alert in learning things quickly, implementing things quickly, and moving forward the technology, watching things closely.
I agree with you on most of that. I do think that there's some things to fear, but we don't want to operate kind of out of a spirit of fear or, timidity. I read a lot, and I rarely read fiction, but recently I read this book. Oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it, but I remember the author. The author is Jack Carr. And this is one of these like Tom Clancy kind of, special forces, military operations, kind of fictional works. I heard this quote this interview from Tom Clancy once. You're familiar with Tom Clancy?
I used to
the author?
read a lot when I was younger.
Yeah. So, after 9/11, this interviewer was like, do you feel guilty at all about 9/11? He's like, what do you mean? And this is my paraphrase, by the way. This isn't word for word, but I was like, well, you wrote about a terrorist attack using airplanes. What if you gave the terrorists that idea? And he was like, are you kidding me? He goes, these ideas that I'm writing about, they're not original. He's like, I've got contacts in the State Department and military. He's like, I talk about what they're seeing in the real world, and then I write it in a fictional sense. So Jack Carr, I think it's Red Sky Morning, is the name of his new book. But he talks about like an AI controlled military operation between like the US and China, and how the AI kind of takes over the launch of nuclear weapons and stuff. Like, it's a scary thing.
Is it like a Jack Ryan thing?
Yeah, it's like that. It's on I think it's Netflix. It might be Amazon. It's the show Terminal List. It's the latest book in that series. Chris Pratt is the star of the TV show, but it's whatever that series is. I thought it was super fascinating from an AI perspective, and I would recommend it. Like if you looking for something to, kind of snack on in your reading. But like he lays out with detail. And as I was reading that book, I'm like, this is probably informed by, like, I'm making some leaps here, but it's probably informed by like real world intelligence, and it's not a hard jump to make mentally as a reader, outside of that community, to be like, there's probably some work being done here on how can you respond quickly? Well, you can respond like quickly and automatically with some kind of intelligence that's making military decisions. Yeah. That's kind of a scary thing.
It is.
But I guess where I landed was, if that's already in motion, I don't think my participation or lack of participation is going to impact that in a material way. So we shouldn't throw it all out, I guess.
No,
is what I'm
absolutely
saying.
not. Especially if you listen to Sam Altman's interviews, you would start seeing the clues where he and his CTO. She never shies when somebody asks, will it go out of control? She'll be, yeah, absolutely. Yes, it can. Anything can happen. Yeah, we have to be alert. It's not one of those things that you can just ignore.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking about as I'm listening to you describe that, following different thought leaders in the space, is I think we should listen carefully to understand, or try to understand, what the motivations or intentions are of some of these leaders. And I think in doing so, you can kind of make some decisions about which tools do you want to support and which ones you don't. That might be something for people to think about and really educate themselves on.
Yeah. And the other thing that's also coming, Nick, is the idea of regulations. EU has led the way. They've rolled out something. I know after elections, US is going to put things in place. And one of the things I would urge ministry leaders to start thinking about is in terms of self-regulation, even now, AI policies and things like that. So those type of things is something that we can start thinking about now, so that we are ready for the coming controlled kind of AI age that's in front of us. That'll also help us pick and choose the tools, our approach to the whole tools conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into tools, and I think you've got some great input for us here today about tools. So for anybody listening who has a question about what tools they should be using, we're going to get to that here in a minute. But you also mentioned custom GPTs and the shift to AI agents. As you know, I live in Montana. Our business meetings happen on the river. more so than the golf course out here. So I was the CEO of a software company, a few years ago before I left that role. But I was fishing this weekend with our chief revenue officer, and I was just kind of getting an update. How's the team? How's revenue? How's the business going and all this stuff? And we were talking through it. And we were talking about AI, and 4 hours together on the river trying to catch some fish, you get into all kinds of situations or conversations. And I was like, hey, have you guys built any custom GPTs? And I was so surprised. Like, this is a $50 million company in the technology space, and they hadn't utilized this at all. I was amazed that they hadn't built any custom GPTs. So even before the shift to agents that you're predicting, I mean, what do they need to know about GPTs, and how would you encourage people to kind of build those out to just understand how they can benefit your team?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that is probably one of the very first big things that ministry leaders need to be thinking about, because the future is AI agents. But what we can do now to prepare for that transition is, as Nick mentioned, the first few steps are custom GPTs. So I would say, okay, here is a quick overview, very high level overview of what these are. So custom GPTs are your ChatGPT kind of programs, but they are pre-programmed to think in a particular way with a very specific objective. So you take ChatGPT, and if you just package a little bit mini ChatGPT version and say this will only do one job, if you haven't started playing around with custom GPTs, then I would strongly recommend you do that, because this is the easiest, simplest version of AI agents. So that's what I would say. So you take a GPT and you give it a job. For example, you can say, here is a GPT that would create a social media image every time I create a social media post. As simple as that, right? It could be as simple as that. It could get complicated. So basically, you open that GPT and you put in a social media post, and it will give you the image without you having to further prompt it or tell it, use red color, which is my brand color, use the logo of the church, use this. So you give all that instruction once, and every time you go in and just put in the social media post, it'll give you a relevant image. You get that picture, just an example, right? So that's custom GPT for you. Now, this custom GPT environment, it has different names with different players. With OpenAI, it's custom GPT. With Claude, they call it projects. Different people call it different things. But that's what is coming. And Mark Zuckerberg just last week announced that they are already starting to work on it with Llama, which is a completely free environment. So you're going to get custom GPT for free. So if you don't use it, it's the most powerful thing in your hand that you don't know how to even operate. So I would say start taking some basic tutorials on custom GPT, and you can create basically a ton of custom GPTs for your ministry. Any use case you think of, create a custom GPT. That's what I would say. Why do you want to keep prompting? Stop learning about prompt engineering, right? And start creating custom GPT. That's a better use of your time than learning prompt engineering. Because you put the prompts once and that's it, and then your custom GPT is ready. Because what that will do to you as a ministry is it will take you a few steps further towards the coming future of AI agents. AI agents are a little more complicated system where it's autonomous. So all you will do is give it a goal, and it will go and accomplish that goal, even talking to outside entities. So it is not limited to LLMs. It's not just limited to AI. It will actually go into your CRM, it will go into your website, it will go into and it can do things for you. So it's like a very advanced custom GPT. So that's what I would say. So just focus on custom GPTs now so that you are ready for the future when it comes to AI agents.
All right. So let me ask you about tools. We were chatting a little bit before we started recording, and you promised to give our listeners the silver bullet, the one tool that they need to be using today. You get the question all the time, what should I be using? Or people say, what about this one? So Natchi, tell our listeners, what is the tool that absolutely everybody has to use right now?
The tool that you should be using is the tool of non-distraction. That's what it is. One of the things that, really...
I'm joking, of course.
I know. Stop being distracted and be more strategic. That's the name of the tool.
Use your brain.
For some,
that's the tool.
Use your brain. Because for some reason, I don't think any other technology has been driven by tools as much as AI is. For example, we had software in the early 2000s when it was not driven by tools. Maybe the closest is apps. When iPhone came up with apps, everybody downloaded all kinds of apps because the whole concept of apps was different. I remember me going in and downloading every single app I could find on the store just to see how an app functioned. But that was, in terms of magnitude, way lesser than what AI is. So AI has basically become this thing where it's all about tools. So the moment I say AI, the next question is tools, because they think AI means tools. To some extent, it's okay to get started like that. But I think we've come a little bit further down. And as ministry leaders, as mature people, as people who are answerable to our board and to our team and everybody, I was just telling an example to Nick. One of the church leaders came and said, Natchi, there's this guy in the congregation that came up to me after the sermon. He showed me an app in his phone. That's what I want to use for our church. I said, no, that's not what you want to use for your church. What you want to use is a strategically sensible, relevant tool that has AI in it. That's what you should do. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, before you even get into what tools I should use, sit down, have a strategic meeting, think about it and say, okay, here is AI. It can do all sorts of things, but how can I use it in a way that's relevant to my ministry? Maybe you don't need 90%, 95% of the tools. Actually, you don't. That's what I'm figuring out, because there's one of my friends who's put together a list of 3,000 tools. And then I look at it and you don't need all of those. You probably need 5. You probably need just 2 or maximum like 10 of those things stacked together in the most strategic way possible. That was my big rant in terms of even senior people getting excited about tools. Stop getting excited about tools, sit down, have a very strategic way of thinking about it. So we have a couple of ways in which we go about, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because I think that, a lot of times leaders have a lack of understanding about the real problems that their team is struggling with, and so efficiency is a great use for AI. You can make your team more efficient in a number of different ways. Well, what area are they struggling with? So yes. At MII, I know that like translation is a big issue. It takes a ton of time to like go through and translate documents. Yes, you can use Google Translate. You can use AI tools to do the translation. But there's still editing involved and things like that. If that's an area of concern where your team's being slowed down, go specifically, strategically, look for one that handles like theological concepts, translating those well, rather than just saying, hey, here's the latest translation tool. We have to be using this, which is usually the directive that comes down to a team, from the top. Yeah. It's like, somebody in our congregation told me about this. We have to buy it immediately. Well, hold on a second. Let's stop and think about it, so.
Yeah, we actually have a very systematic approach to helping ministries select the tools. On a very broad level, I start off with, say, personal leadership level tools for the leaders themselves on a personal level, and then organizational level. Because AI has these 2 big applications. One is from an organizational perspective, giving solutions for workflows. So you can take your workflow, you can break it down into tasks and go that route. But even before I do that, I realized that one of the biggest ways we can become more efficient as ministries is for ministry leaders to say, I want to be efficient. Because if the leader is efficient, then the organization becomes more efficient, because you get more time, you have more time to think about things, you get more time to be less stressed about stuff, then your leadership creativity goes up and you start seeing problems more clearly and you are a little more relaxed, which is going to help the team as well. So what I've seen as a consultant is to strategically focus on making the leaders more efficient. So that is one thing that I've started doing of late. So get into the board and the leadership team and the management team and say, let's do this on a personal basis. Like, what are the things that are taking your time, your energy? For example, like you're a CEO. So I would typically sit with you and say, what are the things that takes the major chunk of your time? Mm-hmm. Is it analyzing dashboards? Are you looking at numbers? Now, can you use Claude to do that? Because today with Claude, there's a screenshot option. All you have to do is take a screenshot of the dashboard. You don't even have to upload a Excel sheet. Just take a screenshot of the dashboard, stick it up in Claude and say, analyze it. It's going to do it for you.
Wow.
That kind of brings your half an hour to 5 minutes. Let's go into your calendar and kind of see which are the time blocks that I can remove for you as a leader of the ministry. So that way your bandwidth frees up. For example, for one minister, we actually put a voice-based transcription AI tool. This is like a WhatsApp voice message, but only with AI. So when he gives an instruction to the team, the AI transcribes it, first of all, and then it summarizes it, gives a bullet point, converts it into a blog post, whatever, all on his mobile phone, just like that. That kind of thing. So one is when that happens, then ministry moves towards AI much more efficiently because the leader has seen what AI can do. Second, as I mentioned, the bandwidth of the leader has really sizably increased when it comes to focusing on the problems and the challenges. Then you can think of, how can I reach unreached people? How can I come up with better strategies? How can I get more people on board? Overall efficiency of the team goes up on the leadership side. And then we move to the organizational setup. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm thinking about, the dashboard analyzation example is a great one, and that's one that I'm going to check out. What's the tool that you're using for the voice instructions? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, there are a few actually, but the one I really like is called Voice Notes. It's simply called Voice Notes. It even has multiple languages. So if you go to App Store and look for Voice Notes, it's one word, Voice Notes.
Okay.
And you can basically set a basic language. You can even do French, German. So I have two languages because I speak another language outside English. So I have both. So, and you can basically record it and then add tags, send it to the team, share it with the team, and so on. So it'll summarize it for you. So it's more than just notes.
That's fascinating. I think that's a really good framework too, starting with, leadership efficiency and then bringing it down into the organizational level. So to just break that down, follow that path a little bit, what are you seeing? How would a leader understand what kind of organizational constraints need to be navigated, and how would you go about doing that or leading your team in that direction? Where do you start?
Yeah. So once we finish with the leader's efficiency, then we can go and say, what is the next low-hanging fruit that we can go after in a ministry? And the low-hanging thing is existing tools. So that's where I start. About a year ago, I came up with this method called the SEET method, SEET, which is strategically enhancing your existing tools. I start off with listing down the top 5 or the top 10 tools that ministries use. For example, I'll just go into a church or a ministry and I would say, okay, so what are the apps that you use? For example, somebody says, what do you use for word processing? People say Microsoft Word. Okay, let's start there. So now Microsoft Word has Copilot. So let's start there. So it is strategically enhancing, but not new things, but strategically enhancing existing tools.
I got you.
So that is where the SEET method suddenly makes sense because there is no new learning. The learning curve is almost nil.
Right.
And they're completely familiar with the framework. If they use Canva, you can start with that. Or they use Adobe Photoshop, you can start with. So almost every single tool now has AI built into it. So that is like the lowest hanging fruit for me and the first easy path of entry for any ministry. So if there are any ministries that are listening to us wondering how to get into AI, I would say start there. Just take a list of your existing apps that you're already paying for and contact them and say, do you have AI? 99% chances are they do. Because otherwise SaaS business today is dead. If they don't have AI, they're not even in the competition. Yeah. So they all do. So then you take that and say, for example, if you use Google Docs, then you have AI Gemini built into Google Docs. So start using that. Then now you start learning. So that is where the enhancing part comes. So it is strategically enhancing existing tools. The enhancement part is where then we can go do a little bit of training or find tutorials related to that tool on how AI works. For example, Copilot. Many people don't know that you can just open a Word document and you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is just go write a prompt, and you can have an entire document filled right in front of you. Or many people don't know that you can select one particular paragraph and you can rewrite it. Many people don't know that you can upload CSV into Copilot and ask it to analyze and come up with another CSV file. So things like that. Now, then you come to the strategic part and say, how can I start stacking these tools on top of each other? So, for example, if one of the things that we're doing with ministries is what I call as the blue ocean tools tactic, where we are trying to find blue ocean areas for ministry that's been ignored, ends of the earth kind of ministry areas. And the thing is, we don't even know that we don't know. But AI is able to find those opportunities for us. For example, if there is a ministry out there that is wanting to minister to people who are going through a particular kind of mental health issue or something very specific like that, what they do is they probably run meta ads, they run certain type of campaigns, and that's what we've been doing for a long time. Sure. And so that's what we're trying to do again. So now what we're doing is we're bringing in AI and saying, okay, let's just export the CSV of existing list of keywords that we're using for generating this content. And then we take the keywords that we think are relevant for the kind of ministry that we want to do. And then there are these two CSV files. We can upload both these CSV files into ChatGPT, and we can tell ChatGPT, hey, look at these two, or to Claude has also given phenomenal results. And to Claude and say, look at these two CSV files and give me the top 10 content patterns that I need to focus on in my campaign. Mm-hmm. So what Claude and ChatGPT will do is it'll look at all these data and it'll come up and say, hey, based on these two CSV files, I think the people who are trying to reach, if you say number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, these kind of words and these kind of phrases, then I think they will respond to you better. And then you take that, then you give it to your designers, then you create a campaign, you create a carousel, you create a video based on that. So you're tapping into AI to see what I call as a blue ocean, an audience that you never thought existed, that is out there in the digital world. Because Gen Z is changing, Alpha generation is changing. We really don't have, as a ministry, as a media ministry, we don't have all the data to really know what's going on. So that's another way to do it.
I love that. I think that, what I'm thinking about is when I was at Christian Vision, we started CV Outreach. And one of the big kind of components behind that helped it be so successful was I had 2 developers. We built out the tech stack on Amazon Web Services, which was costing me like $150,000 a month. Like, it was so expensive because we had so much data that we were crunching. But we built natural language processing models, and we would feed all of the responses, like the whole conversation between our follow-up team and our seekers. We would feed it into this model, and we would say, you just basically ask it to analyze all of that unstructured data that exists in the written conversation to identify trends. And one of the interesting things that came out of that was this issue of like loneliness in relationship, or really the lack of relationships, meaningful relationships in people's lives. But nobody ever wrote and said, I don't have any meaningful relationships in my life. They would say things like, I don't know who to talk to. You're the only person I can share this with. They would say things like, after months of searching, I found this website and I'm wondering if you could help me with a question. Like, it was really non-obvious language that really the machine learning was able to boil it down, which is, an early form of AI, would boil that down into like this issue of loneliness. And then what our team did was we started creating content around loneliness. And we did some projects with like the Bible Project. So we would create video content with the Bible Project as a partner to speak to this issue of loneliness and just kind of like name it and go right at it. And we saw this tremendous response to that. But I don't think we ever would have realized that had we not had those tools to help analyze. But what's great today is you don't need true developers and their salary and this whole tech stack being custom built, you can just use some of these tools that'll do that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. The capability of Claude kind of tools is just mind blowing. First of all, yeah, I really want to appreciate you for doing that and the CV team. That's pioneering work years ago. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what's happening now, just in an advanced, like you say, advanced scale with low resources. But the thought process has been there since. It's amazing that you guys really thought about that. Yeah. And tools like Claude today, for example, Claude can, I don't know, many people know that, but you can pretty much take a screenshot of an app. So you can try it right now. You can just open one of your, say, for example, a note-taking app or a to-do list app. You can take a screenshot and just upload that image to Claude and say, program an app for me that does this.
Wow.
It'll just give you an app. And the cool thing is, Nick, it will help you publish that app right away with a publish button. So you can publish it and it becomes a SaaS app with coding at the back end that you can actually use. So I've been playing around with it. You can just share that link. If you have a task app like Todoist or something, you just take a screenshot of Todoist and you can just create this in about 10-15 minutes. And then it gives you a link and you can publish that link. And with the database and everything, like Claude gives you the back end and the front end, everything, you can share it with your team and it becomes your task app for free with your team.
Wow.
It's like incredible things that you can do. But again, coming back to strategic approach, saying, what are my biggest pain points as a ministry and how can AI jump in? So unless you're strategic, it's like having all these tools. It's somebody said, I have had this Swiss Army knife. You're a trekking kind of guy, so you'd appreciate this. One of my friends said, I've had this Victorinox for years and I haven't used more than 2 of those, an orange peeler maybe, and then there's something else. So that's what AI is. If you don't have a strategy, then you really are not deploying it in the right way.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have not done that. I mean, you're ahead of me on this one. Building custom apps. There's a number of things that come to mind as I'm listening to you talk. Like, I know you have children, and my oldest is going to be a freshman in college. I think we take him to school in like 2 weeks or something, and I think he wants to do like mechanical engineering. The thing about the university model is that it's lagging. You know, there's a lot of innovation that comes out of universities, but those things that innovation doesn't get included into program and like curriculum or some kind of, body of study until it's kind of been proven, right? Like you don't get a degree in theoretical AI, for example. I mean, maybe you can, but maybe you can. I don't know. I haven't seen that. If you can get a degree in astrophysics, which is basically like theory, maybe you can do this. But a question that I've been trying to answer, like for my kids recently, is like, what field do you go into these days? This is totally off subject, but I'm kind of curious, like what you would think about that. Like how do you position yourself for the future as a student?
Yeah. I think that is such a big thing to think about, because I recently heard a TED talk by these 2 ladies that really got me thinking and actually got me on my line to start writing my book also on AI impact. They said something I can't remember the whole thing, but the crux of that TED talk was, they said the next generation is going to be that a new generation that has to deal with robotics and AI in every single aspect of their life. And the way they think and live is going to be unimaginably different. You and me are different from our older generation, yes, and our fathers were different from their generation, yes, but this different we are talking about is completely different, right? Because it's going to be the way their life is going to be impacted by automation. Imagine everything is going to be automated.
Yeah.
And they said it's our responsibility to actually hand over AI in a good way to our children. Otherwise, it could go either way, and it could be crazy. So when you're coming back to your question in terms of how would they study, what would they major in? I don't even know. I don't think there is anything called major in. I think the way they'll think about the next generation will be like, what do I enjoy? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? And it could be multiple things. I think it's going to be multiple things. I think they can do music, they can do a bachelor's degree, and they can do a post-graduation, and they can do a doctorate and everything in different fields. I think that's where it is. I think the whole learning and university structure is going to be very different. So I feel, thanks for bringing this up. It's very deep in my heart. I feel like somehow, Nick, that you and me, these people who are talking about this right now are in a way responsible to structure this properly for our kids. Otherwise, they're going to be like, they will figure it out. Obviously, they will clear the mess by themselves, but we don't want it to be too messy. So I think we do have some kind of responsibility as well. That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also an opportunity for the church to, I think, contribute to that education in some way. I'm thinking about, I was with a gentleman recently who's making really like a seminary Bible program, seminary level, available for free to really anybody who wants to log on to this learning management system and go through the course. I'd love to see some of those things developed in this technology space as well. And like, I know that our friends at Faith Tech are thinking through that stuff also. But, really from a biblical worldview, how do you engage and create some of these new, not just tools, but like some of these new concepts and ideas in this creative space?
Yeah, one of the things, that's one of the things I shared in the CV conference as well. I encouraged leaders to think about two things. One is the shift in the source of influence. There is a big shift happening. The next generation, the way they're going to be influenced is not just the way, but the source of influence. It's going to be Perplexity AI. It's going to be ChatGPT. It's going to be those conversations they have with Omni, and just voice-based conversations. If they ask questions like, who is God? What do I do? How do I make sense of my life? They are going to make sense of their life based on these inputs from these AI agents who are thinking by themselves. So I think it's important for the church to influence this ecosystem. So that was one thing. The other, so in one way, if you really think deeply about what can I do now? All this is happening. Some of it I don't even have control. I'm not OpenAI. I'm not Google. I'm not Copilot.
Right.
So what do I do? Here is my thing. Is what I tell people. Focus on your core competence. Because if you focus on your core competence, your own messaging and your calling, for example, if there is a church that is very good and called to minister to families, and if family focus is your thing, do that 100%. Because what is going to happen is, using AI and everything else, your content is going to be discovered in a much more easier way. And in the last 15 years, I never thought I would say this, Nick, but for the first time, I feel discoverability is not a problem. Because as you and me have been fighting for discoverability. We get good content and we say, how do we get in front of people? How do you get in front of people? AI knows exactly how to get in front of people. I was recently listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, and he said, look, focus on organic, because organic is back. And organic, the way organic is influencing paid ads is a very interesting model.
Yeah.
So your short videos and all your organic content, podcasts like this, is actually telling the algorithm how to rank the audience. And based on that ranking, ads are becoming much more efficient, less costly, more cost effective.
Right.
So what's happening is discoverability is actually not a very big problem. So what is a bigger problem is for you to say, am I creating good content? Am I focusing on my core competence?
Yeah.
Am I ministering to people the way God has called me to minister? So I think that if you just get deep down into that and then use AI for enhancing that, then I think there is a good chance that we can use AI as a media ministry.
Yeah, it all comes back to delivering value, and
Yes.
yeah, that's fascinating. I think you've been super generous with your time. I just want to make sure that we touched on everything you wanted to talk about with social media AI tools. I mean, I think we've touched that a couple of different ways, but any kind of final thoughts on social and really kind of as a lead in, I'm going to go all the way back to like when ministry started getting involved in social media. It was this idea. It's like, oh, just give it to a 13-year-old, and they'll figure it out for you, which I hated that at the time. But I think what that is, I think social media, the work of like managing a social media campaign has always kind of been held in high regard in the impact that a ministry can see, but low in the value and the talent that we put, onto those teams, because it's kind of this throwaway idea. I think that's completely misguided. But just final thoughts on like social media management, using AI tools.
Yes, just coming back to our whole low-hanging fruit, easy entry kind of pathway, right from leadership to starting with existing tools. The next big thing that can really impact your ministry is using AI for social media, because most ministries now, thanks to the lockdown and all of it, most of us are in live streaming. We are in social media. We use social media a bit more fluently than we did 3-4 years ago. So what I would say is just break down those pieces of social media, right from strategy, research, content creation, deployment, and tracking, measurement. All those 5 pieces, start thinking about deploying AI into that. So that's one of the easiest way for you to go up. And if you're thinking, okay, as a ministry, how do I get started? Then I would say just start off with asking AI for strategy for your social media. Just take your channel, download some of your videos, transcribe it, throw it inside one of the AI tools, and ask it to analyze and give you strategies. They are so good at it. So it will tell you this is where you're going, this is how it is. So just get an audit, AI audit done right from there. And then, like I told you, if you have different dashboards, if you have tons of data, which I'm imagining most of the ministries listening to us are going to have a lot of data over the years. Just take that data, just remove the personally identified information from there, any names, emails, and so on. And then just use the raw data like location and stuff like that, which is not personally identifiable, and upload it to AI and ask it to give you patterns of some of your future campaigns. So at a strategic level, you can start there. And of course, you've heard a lot of people talk about how to use it for content, image generation, and stuff like that. Just to give one example that covers the entire spectrum, think of your YouTube channel. I would say every ministry listening should have a YouTube strategy.
Yeah, I agree.
Hopefully you do. And if you do, this is a good time to revamp your YouTube strategy. Because if you take 10 of your YouTube videos, transcribe it, give it into AI, analyze it, and ask it to give you AI developed descriptions, you will know where your descriptions are lacking. If you ask AI for rewriting your titles, it will give you AI rewritten titles. Those are optimized. Just by doing this, we have seen incredible turnaround in YouTube channels, because AI knows exactly what works, especially if you use Gemini, which is owned by YouTube. You get the point? You get the inside information on what is optimized. So use Gemini, ask it to rewrite your every single YouTube title. Ask a Gemini to rewrite your YouTube descriptions. Ask Gemini for guidance on what kind of thumbnails you need to create. Take those thumbnail prompts, put it in Canva, and create those thumbnails. Just go back and restructure your existing YouTube videos. That's a great place to start. And suddenly your ministry impact it'll start going up. And then when you get the results, then take those results, download the CSV file, again, push those metrics and dashboards into Claude and ask Claude to tell you where you're lacking. What should you be focusing on next? What are the type of videos you should be creating? We did something with one of the ministries. We took all the titles of all the YouTube video, not all the titles, but maybe about 40, 50 titles. We fed that into AI and said, based on this and based on the numbers of views and so on, what do you think we should be creating? What do you think our audience are liking? And AI came up with these 20 different titles that said, based on your views, based on the engagement, based on the watch time, based on the drop off, these are the topics that will do well for you in the future. So that kind of thing. Social media is a great place to get excited about AI and also see big results using AI. So I would say start there, and it'll make a big difference to your media industry.
Natchi, I always enjoy talking with you, but this has been a masterclass today. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, experience so freely. I think that people listening to this have a lot of takeaways today that are going to be really valuable. So really appreciate you, my friend, and thanks for the time.
Likewise, Nick. Always have a big admiration for you and the pioneering spirit that you have, and most of all, the fun that we have when we talk.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope we get to do that again in person sometime. That'd be fun.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Take care.
Blessings, my friend. Bye.